Yes, my name's Stephen Simon. I'm the Business Development Manager for Integration, Data and AI. Today's session is about walking through how to upgrade from BizTalk and basically any legacy integration solution and move it into a modern cloud-based integration platform, which is Azure Integration Services, as we'll talk through today. I've got my colleague with me, Mark. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My integration journey started around 20 years ago with BizTalk Server 2004. I've been designing and developing integration solutions with pretty much every single version of BizTalk ever since then. Over the last 6 years or so, my primary focus has been designing integration solutions in Azure and working with customers like yourselves to migrate their existing integration workloads into Azure.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. So I'll just talk through the agenda, but the agenda you can see in front of you. We're doing the introductions now, but we'll walk through. I'm going to hand over to Mark. He's going to walk through why are we talking about upgrading BizTalk now. And again, we will talk about BizTalk, we will focus on it, but the same does apply to other integration tools you may be using, legacy integration tools, I would say, and how to bring that modernization and migration into the cloud-based environment with Azure. Mark will then talk through the migration and the modernization paths. And again, this also applies for other legacy applications. Then it will circle back to me. I'll talk through one of the case studies where we've done one of these projects with another customer. Inside of the slide set, which we'll provide you at the end, there is some additional slides in there which gives you information on the credibility for HSO in this area, some of the other customers we've worked with, and an additional case study. Although we will allocate a small amount of time at the end if there's Q&A, and myself and Mark can stay on a bit longer if you want to talk to us and ask us any questions. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Mark, if Mark can take control. And I think the meat of the talk today would be Mark talking through the solution and the two areas I've mentioned. Over to you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the biggest question is why even think about moving away from BizTalk Server? And why do you want to be thinking about this now? Any integration product that you've been using for a decent amount of time may have met many of your needs, but what used to work in the past probably isn't working very well now. Traditionally, organizations operated within a network boundary of their own data centers. Within that data center, there'd be many applications all requiring interconnectivity and orchestration to move data from one system to another. Integration solutions were deployed to act as a central communication hub for the application ecosystem, essentially providing a single point for data exchange and configuration within the organization. And things have been like this for pretty much over 20 years now, but the integration world is getting more complicated. Employees now expect access to mobile devices, and this is fueling a huge demand for mobile apps in the enterprise. And if users can't access their data easily, it impacts their productivity. Traditionally hosted applications for payroll, email, and more are now moving to cheaper and simpler cloud-based SaaS counterparts. All the applications aren't necessarily on-premise anymore. Organizations are modernizing and migrating legacy business applications onto cloud technologies and platforms. And a trend within that is to move from sort of more monolithic applications to microservices and highly distributed applications. And this introduces even more complexity and increases the need for communication for our integration platform to handle. Further, we're bringing connectivity requirements to more things. The Internet of Things, retail, manufacturing, health, and AI are all evolving rapidly. And the world of smart devices, generating more messages, more data than we've ever seen before. So the ecosystem is complicated, and so is the integration platforms that maybe you've been using to date, not as comfortable as maybe they were previously. And this raises a lot of questions around your current integration platform. With all this new data flowing through it, are you able to scale and perform effectively? Is a single point of integration the best solution for your new highly distributed applications, or should you be looking at something that's more distributed? Is your integration solution able to keep up with modern integration standards and protocols? After all, BizTalk Server was designed in the early 2000s, and it doesn't support natively modern protocols such as REST and JSON. And so if any of these questions are difficult to answer, then you need to start thinking about modernizing your BizTalk server infrastructure to keep up with your business needs. What we do know is that integration isn't really a plug and play solution anymore. Integration encapsulates everything we do, from application to application, B2B, SaaS, IoT, as well as the data and the people and business processes that run your business. We have to think of integration as a horizontal enabler and not a vertical slice of the pie. So, for example, we need to integrate data more seamlessly across applications and services, both inside the organization and externally with our partners and suppliers. You need to be able to communicate with a wide variety of devices in your own organization. And there's a need for better and more informed decision making using data and infused with AI so that you get the right decisions. And we need to enable people to work more effectively and more efficient processes. And this all boils down to having the right data in the right place at the right time. So if you're struggling in any of these areas, and if you're using BizTalk Server, or if you're using another legacy integration platform, then it's time to start thinking about how do I modernize my integration platform into Azure. So modernizing your integration platform into Azure is going to give you some immediate benefits. One of these is that you can move more quickly when it comes to building new integrations. And this means you can deliver value faster to your business. You can handle your business's growing needs more efficiently and in a cost-effective way. In the old days, certainly with on-premise deployments, we used to deploy infrastructure to handle those seasonal peaks of demand. But with the cloud, we can scale up and down as required. And if you're starting to buy more best-of-breed applications, typically SaaS cloud-hosted applications, then modernization makes it easier to customize and integrate those applications with your existing application portfolio. Integration should never become a blocker. And we want developers to continue delivering great value, to feel energized and thrive in what they do. And this translates to using the latest technology because it helps them solve challenges more efficiently and helps them stay current in terms of their own skills and capabilities. And many of these benefits leverage the underlying capabilities of the Azure Cloud Platform. Things like serverless cloud environments, automatic scaling, and integrated security with Microsoft Defender. These all combine with Azure Integration Services to provide an integration platform that is fit for the modern application landscape. But that's a lot of benefits. But there's also another compelling reason to move away from BizTalk Server. It's no secret that BizTalk Server is being end-of-lifed, and this is probably the main reason you're listening to this webinar today. The 2020 version of BizTalk is the last version, and it will move out of mainstream support in 2028. That's about 3.5 years away. There'll be a further 2 years of extended support after that till April the 9th, 2030. So there's a limited period of time where your existing investments and assets in BizTalk are going to be supported. And in many organizations, operating a fully supported platform with mainstream support is a requirement for ISO 27001, cybersecurity and industry compliance. Now, 3.5 years may feel like a long time, but you need to start thinking about this now to ensure that you're fully migrated off BizTalk Server by April 2028, and ideally with time to spare. Many of you will have large and complex integrations implemented in BizTalk Server, and the migration takes time, as I'll explain in a later slide. But these are timescales for BizTalk Server 2020. If you're using a version of BizTalk that's older than that version, the end-of-life dates will be earlier. The only other version of BizTalk Server that is in any sort of support today is BizTalk Server 2016. That's already out of mainstream support and is currently in extended support that expires in around 2 years' time. If you're using any older version than that, then you're completely out of support. And you really need to be starting to think about migrating those BizTalk workloads ASAP so that you can get back into a supported platform. So hopefully you've now got a better view of some of the benefits of migrating from BizTalk to Azure. But migrating your integration workload is not a straightforward task. There's no silver bullet. There's no automated wizard for migration, and we can't simply lift and shift the existing BizTalk server artifacts and processes into Azure integration services. So when it comes to migration, you've got a couple of options. The first option is a very simplistic lift and shift to Azure. So if you're running your BizTalk integration workloads on-premise in your own data centers, then one option is to take those servers, move them to Azure virtual machines. And what you still fundamentally have is a BizTalk server solution. And this option was pretty popular maybe 7-8 years ago when everyone was moving workloads from the data center into cloud. And the obvious benefits of that are that there's no rework or development to do. And any skills that you've got in BizTalk are still relevant. And you can exit your data center a bit quicker and associated costs with that. But there's still one fundamental problem with this, and that's that you're still running BizTalk server. So all of the benefits that I've spoken about previously, you can't realize any of them. And you still have that looming deadline with the end of life for BizTalk server. So this was an option that people were pursuing a few years ago, and it was very popular. But it's not really a viable solution anymore. The other solution is more of a hybrid solution. So this approach is where new integrations are built on Azure, not BizTalk server. And this tends to be driven by business change programs. So existing integrations of BizTalk are phased out over time. So for example, maybe you're implementing a new cloud-based ERP platform such as Dynamics. And as part of that change program, you'd retire all of your existing BizTalk integrations for your old ERP platform, and you build out a new set of integrations based in Azure to integrate with Dynamics. So the advantages of this are it avoids that migration and sort of massive re-engineering of your existing integration workload. And it means that you can leverage your new Azure features for those immediately for those new integration processes. But the drawback of this is it's very much driven by your business change program, and that tends to take a fairly, we're talking years and years for that to migrate all of your existing BizTalk workloads. And whilst you're in the process of doing that, you're going to be maintaining two integration platforms, one in BizTalk, one in Azure. And of course, that has an associated increase in cost and effort. And still, it doesn't really fundamentally solve that problem of that you're running out of time with BizTalk. So what you tend to want to do is to sort of pursue a third approach, which is more of an accelerated migration. And this will give you a little bit more certainty around when you're finally going to be able to move all of your workloads off BizTalk into Azure. And this is what we call the phased migration. So this is where we're looking at your entire BizTalk integration workload, and we're planning to migrate it all to Azure, typically in a series of migration phases. Certainly for the larger integration workloads that have been sort of growing and growing over maybe 10 or 15 years time and hundreds of distinct integration processes, we'd look at sort of taking a more migration phase approach where we're migrating them in phases. But it's still an accelerated process. And the advantages of that are we've reduced the time where you're running two integration processes in parallel, which obviously means you save time and cost. And it means you can retire BizTalk much more quickly and therefore avoid the support problem. And you can realize those cost savings sooner, and you can start using all of the new capabilities and features of Azure a lot more quickly. But migrating BizTalk server is a complex to plan and coordinate. Because it is an accelerated program, it does require a lot of dedication and focus from the project team to make it all work. So how do we actually make this happen? So HSO offers a BizTalk to Azure assessment. It's an assessment that will give you an idea of the complexity in migrating your existing BizTalk workload to Azure Integration Services. The assessment takes around 5 days, and it will give you a high-level view of what that migration could look like, how long it would take, what the effort would be for that migration, and a bit of a roadmap for what the next steps are. The first part of the assessment is where we start looking at the integration landscape. So we're looking at your existing BizTalk implementation. We're looking at the infrastructure it runs on, the environments you've got, and we're looking at sort of documentation and standards that you've been following. And that documentation piece is really important because, like I said, a BizTalk migration is an engineering effort as we migrate your processes from BizTalk to Azure. So understanding what the existing processes do and the documentation to support that is really important. The next steps around looking at the BizTalk platform. So HSO has a BizTalk assessment tool. It's a tool that we wrote ourselves and we've used successfully on many similar projects. And this allows us to, we deploy it onto your BizTalk servers, and this gives us an in-depth set of reports that describe your existing BizTalk workload. So it tells us all about the components you're using. It tells us all about the connectors you're using, all of the orchestrations, and the complexity scoring for them as well. So we use all of this information as part of our analysis phase to actually understand how would we do the migration, a bit of an estimate in terms of the effort and the costs associated with that. And we also use that to start thinking about risk planning and mitigation. And these are all deliverables that we include as part of the outputs of this 5-day exercise. So this is a great way to start to take that initial step to understand what is your existing BizTalk workload look like. And Steve mentioned at the beginning of this that there's a lot of the sort of techniques and the approaches we're taking here actually apply not only to BizTalk server migrations, but in any legacy integration modernization as well. So if you've got an existing integration platform based on MuleSoft and you're looking to modernize to Azure, for example, then we take a very similar approach. Okay, so just briefly, what are some of the migration challenges? The first one's around sort of on the functional side. In order to migrate from BizTalk to Azure, we've got to know what each integration process does. And this goes back to what I was talking about documentation. So if you've got some really good documentation that's up to date about what each of those integration processes in BizTalk are doing, then that's a really good start in order for us to then work out how to migrate and re-implement those processes in BizTalk. If your documentation's a little bit out of date, maybe the integration process was developed 10 years ago, the people who were involved in that have moved on from your organization, a lot of knowledge may have been lost, then that means trying to understand what we're actually migrating becomes a lot harder. So that's one of the key sort of messages really here, is that make sure you've got that documentation up to date and complete. And make the migration process a lot simpler and more straightforward. The next one's on the technical side. So the BizTalk technical environment's very different from that in Azure. There is ability to lift and shift some artifacts from BizTalk to Azure, but in many cases it's a bit of a re-engineering effort. There's a lot of Microsoft best practice out there now, guidance in terms of how you do that migration. But understanding how we do that technical migration is really key to this process. And within HSO, we've got a lot of experience in this. and a lot of people that we can use to make that a bit easier.
No. Okay.
Planning is another one. So this is a really important one, especially for those larger integration workloads. We always look at a phased delivery for larger projects, so that we can try and reduce some of the risks by taking that, identifying groups of integrations that we can migrate and go live. And obviously, one of the other challenges is that the integration landscape is continually changing. A migration that might take 12 or 14 months is happening whilst the production integrations are continually evolving and being added. So this comes down to that careful planning of what that integration process, of that migration process might look like. And another one is validation. So I mentioned that some of the integration processes may have been developed 10, 15 years ago. And the people who were involved in those integrations may have moved on. So you may have lost a lot of the knowledge around how do you test the migrated integration processes. Test environments that may have been available with your third parties 10 years ago probably aren't available anymore. So there's a lot of effort that we need to put into just planning the testing strategy, understanding who's going to be doing testing and how we're going to execute testing. And again, these are all the sorts of challenges that we come across with many customers, and that we can lead you through that process to make sure that all of these challenges are addressed and any of the risks associated with them are mitigated. And then the last one's around the cutover. Obviously, this migrating your integration workload is a significant exercise, and we need to make sure that that go live and that cutover process is as risk-free as possible. And there's various techniques and approaches that we can use with that. But in summary, those are the sort of the key migration challenges that we tend to find across all of the BizTalk migrations. And like I said, these aren't really specific to BizTalk, to be honest. If you're looking to migrate any legacy integration platform into Azure integration services, then these apply equally to that as well. Okay, Stephen, do you want to take over and carry on?
No problem. Thank you. So I've got one case study because I realised we're running out of time, and it is it actually maps quite well onto all of the challenges what Mark's just talked about. It's a large a technical wholesaler essentially from the Netherlands. They've got about 2 million items, 700 suppliers. They do things like electrical engineering, lighting, heat and climate control, etc. So what I would say is they wanted to look to migrate from one of the earlier versions of BizTalk. And like Mark had said, we'd went in and done an assessment with them, and we'd looked at how they were going to do it in a staged approach. So it's not an integration project, generally doesn't look like something like an ERP where it's a big bang. We tend to do integrations in waves as we go along, or in separate slices, however you want to look at it, where we come in, do the initial assessment, put a base platform in, which takes a low number of days, 10, 20 days type of mark, where we do what we call a landing zone, where we get the Azure platform ready for integration. From that point, we then look at the individual systems and analyze how are we going to integrate to those systems on an individual business focus level. And we did that with Technique Uni, and it actually took them, I think it took them a couple of years overall, but it was all about a modernization exercise and how they moved to the cloud. And they got all the benefits of them moving to the cloud, about helping them streamline their operations, fully leverage cloud technology, etc. Just about their agility in a rapidly evolving market. So like I say, we started off with that analysis with them because they knew BizTalk was coming to end of life, but then we deployed it over time, which is a really interesting case study for us. There's another one I've put in the slide deck. You can have a look at it, which is a finance-based case study. But also inside of the slide deck, we've also got another slide which shows you about another 10 customers we've done in the UK about various different projects, and we're happy to talk about those. Now, if I look at the last slide, the one thing I would say is, if it is something you like to discuss further, there's my details. Myself and Mark would be happy to jump on a call. The wrap up from my side is, we understand that BizTalk's coming to end of life. We're happy to have that detailed conversation about that, but also the same applies to the other legacy systems, as we've talked about several times. The assessments there where we can have that initial discussion, and if we need to talk about the more lengthy assessment where we look at formal process to do BizTalk, then we're happy to have a chat about that. But other than that, thanks a lot for your time, everybody. Appreciate it.